Negative team? Yes. Grayson? Yeah. All right, well, in this final speech, I'm going to be looking at two fundamental questions. The questions of which the answers to these questions should decide who wins the debate round. The questions are, who saves lives and who helps the economy? But before we go into those questions, I'd like to quickly talk about the argument of topicality under the counterplan. Now, the negative team quickly pulled through their argument that they read evidence and that the rules deny. However, let's go back to what the rules say. The rules say the definition of affirmative team is the team that upholds the resolution. They accepted this in cross-examination. It says nothing about the negative team, so thus it therefore implies that the job of the negative team is to stop the affirmative from winning. If the affirmative wins by upholding the resolution, then the negative wins by stopping the affirmative from upholding the resolution. But by upholding the resolution, they're doing our job for us. And as the rules say, if the resolution is upheld, the affirmative team wins the round. That's what we believe in today's debate round, so we ask you to vote on that, what the rules say and what sound debate theory tells us. Now that we've talked about that, let's go down to my two questions. The first question is, who saves lives? Who saves lives? And here we'll be talking about the orphan drug credit. Now, the negative team said, first off, that we're forcing capitalism. However, we're not forcing capitalism, we're simply putting good incentives in place. And the reason for this is because the government has resources available in order to incentivize orphan drug development. And as my evidence said, corporations won't be able to make a profit from these orphan drugs unless the credit is in place. The negative team said in their last speech that the only reason that it wouldn't be profitable without the credit is because we have a corporate tax rate. However, that's simply not true. Corporations have huge profits right now, and even so, our evidence said that without the credits, there would be no drugs developed. The evidence specifically said that it was from the United States Chamber of Commerce. We looked at history. The Food and Drug Administration said that before the orphan drug credit, 1 drug was approved each year. After the orphan drug credit, 20 were approved each year. History sides the affirmative team, and every single one of these every single one of these drugs saved 211 lives. This should be valued before any other issue in today's debate round. Because, I mean, if the economy goes down, it can obviously go up in the future, but if you lose a life, that life is gone forever. Lives need to be upheld first, and the affirmative team saves lives, the negative team loses them. Now that we've talked about that, let's go on to the second question, which is who helps the economy? And first off, we'll be talking about the deficit disadvantage. Now, the only piece of evidence that the negative team has read about revenue was of the $33 billion that my partner read a source indict, a flawed study piece of evidence on. Now, the negative team's only response was that that wasn't their source. So they accepted that our piece of evidence saying that the study was flawed was true, they just said that wasn't their study. Unfortunately, they didn't read through their evidence very well. The evidence says, Stephen Enton, president of the Institute for Research on the Economics of Taxation, that's the study we were talking about, employed a macroeconomic model that found ending the corporate income tax would generate sufficient increases in GDP that overall federal revenues would increase by approximately $33 billion annually. That piece of evidence said that the study was from IRET, the Institute for Research on the Economics of Taxation, the source that we indicted with the flawed study piece of evidence in our speech. The negative team, their only response to that, to our evidence about the flawed study, was that it wasn't their source. So they accepted that our piece of evidence was true. So given it does apply, they do not increase the revenue of the government. They decrease it. They lose $350 billion a year, given that's how much the corporate tax generates. Additionally, my partner made the argument in his speech that if there's a short-term increase in the deficit, that leads to the long-term deficit increasing as well, because that short-term decrease ends up hurting economic growth enough that the revenue is never recovered. They didn't respond to this in their last speech, so this proves the point that the negative team decreases the revenue of the government and increases the deficit. This leads to, as my partner said in his first speech, when you increase the deficit, you reduce consumer confidence and you reduce consumer spending. They didn't respond to this, so we can assume it is true. They reduce consumer spending and thus hurt the economy. And as my partner said in his last speech, we did have numbers in the YC. We had numbers that we gained $90 billion of revenue a year because we stopped profit shifting. We get that revenue from profit shifting. The negative team doesn't do that. So we increase the revenue of the government, which means that, as my partner said, and the negative team accepted is true, that increases consumer spending, which means that the economy is helped. The negative team is not getting consumer spending with their plan. All they're doing is reducing it by decreasing the revenue of the government. What we do is increase consumer spending and help the economy in that way. These logical links have been agreed on by both teams, so the affirmative team does win the round on this point. The negative team made the point in their first speech that the way to grow the economy is by consumer spending, because that's 70% of the economy. We access consumer spending, so we grow the economy. They reduce it, they hurt the economy. So their final argument was about Estonia. And as my partner said in his speech, you can't compare Estonia to the United States. The negative team's evidence, as I said in cross-examination, never mentioned the United States, it mentioned other countries, and it didn't say it should be applied to the United States. You can't simply apply that small country to the entire economy of the United States. There's no comparison there. So we've seen that at the end of the debate round, the negative team is doing our job for us by upholding the resolution. They lose lives by getting rid of these special incentives for treating rare diseases, and they decrease consumer spending by increasing the deficit. So I ask for an affirmative ballot. Thank you.